Nearly 2 decades, an anonymous writer terrorized a small Ohio town by sending threatening and very obscene letters to people there. Now, those letters exposed alleged secrets about the neighbors and friends in Circleville, Ohio. No one has ever been charged.
In the mid-1970s, Circleville, Ohio, was the kind of place that believed in its own predictability. It was a small American town built on routine, tradition, and generations of shared history. Families had lived there for decades. Children attended the same schools their parents once had. Neighbors recognized each other's cars, voices, and even daily schedules. There was a quiet confidence in the belief that nothing truly shocking could happen there. Life moved in steady rhythms: school mornings, church Sundays, football Fridays. People assumed they understood one another, and that assumption created a powerful illusion of safety. But small towns carry a hidden contradiction. While everyone seems connected, privacy is fragile. Secrets exist, but they survive only because no one dares to drag them into the open. Reputations are fragile currency. Once damaged, they rarely recover. Circleville thrived on that unspoken agreement. What happens inside a home stays inside a home. That social contract remained intact until 1976, when a plain envelope appeared in a mailbox belonging to Mary Gillespie. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a handwritten message composed in careful block letters, almost mechanical in appearance. The writing style was deliberate, stripped of personality, as if the author wanted to erase any trace of identity. The letter accused Mary, a local school bus driver, of having an affair with the school superintendent. It warned her to stop immediately or face public exposure. The tone was not chaotic or emotional. It was calm, confident, and disturbingly certain. It did not ask questions. It made statements. At first, the letter could have been dismissed as harassment. Anonymous cruelty, though rare, was not unimaginable, but the specificity of the accusation lingered. It felt less like gossip and more like surveillance. Whoever wrote it claimed intimate knowledge. And in a town like Circleville, that implication was devastating. Soon, more letters arrived, not just to Mary, but to her husband, Ron Gillespie, then to relatives, then to other residents across town. The pattern became undeniable. The letters were systematic. Each one contained personal accusations tailored to its recipient. Affairs, private disputes, alleged misconduct. Nothing appeared beyond the writer's reach. The town slowly realized that this was not random harassment. It was a coordinated campaign of psychological manipulation. Fear began to replace familiarity. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now looked at one another with suspicion. Conversations became guarded. Every unopened envelope felt threatening. The most disturbing realization was this: the writer had to be local. The knowledge displayed in the letters was too intimate for an outsider. Someone inside Circleville was watching. Police became involved. Handwriting samples were analyzed. Investigators searched for fingerprints, motives, grudges. Yet the careful block handwriting revealed little. The letters were mailed from different locations, preventing easy tracing. Evidence slipped through fingers. The absence of answers amplified the fear. The writer's greatest weapon was not violence, it was doubt. And doubt began to corrode the foundation of the entire community. Death escalation and the booby-trapped warning. For Ron Gillespie, the letters were deeply destabilizing. As a husband in a town where reputation meant everything, he could not easily ignore repeated accusations about his marriage. Even if he trusted Mary, the constant repetition created tension. Each letter reopened wounds. Each warning suggested that humiliation was imminent. Friends later described Ron as increasingly agitated, frustrated by the feeling that someone was targeting his family with precision. In August 1977, Ron received another particularly aggressive letter. That same night, he left his home carrying a gun. His intentions remain unclear. Perhaps he believed he knew the identity of the writer. Perhaps he intended confrontation. Perhaps anger and desperation pushed him into action. Hours later, Ron's car was discovered crashed along a rural road. He was dead. Authorities ruled it an accident. His blood alcohol level was above the legal limit.
He had almost twice the legal limit of alcohol in his blood.
On the surface, the explanation seemed straightforward. Yet one detail complicated the narrative. His firearm had been discharged. There was no definitive evidence of a struggle at the crash site, but the fired weapon raised questions that could not be fully answered. Had he fired in anger? Had he encountered someone? Or had his death truly been the tragic result of intoxication and emotional distress? Ron's death intensified the town's fear. What began as harassment now carried the shadow of possible violence. Instead of stopping, the letters escalated.
Everything will kind of go back to normal, except it didn't, because the letters never stopped.
Large roadside signs appeared publicly accusing Mary of misconduct. The private humiliation had transformed into public shaming. Anyone driving by could see the accusations. The writer had grown bolder. One day while driving her bus route, Mary noticed one of these signs posted prominently along the road. Determined to remove it, she stopped and approached the signpost. As she examined it more closely, she discovered something chilling. The sign was attached to a box containing a loaded firearm, rigged to discharge if disturbed. It was a crude but potentially lethal booby trap. This was no longer psychological intimidation, it was attempted murder. Police traced the firearm to Paul Freshour, Mary's former brother-in-law. His connection to the weapon immediately placed him under suspicion. Paul denied involvement, insisting he had been framed. Handwriting experts compared his samples to the anonymous letters and found similarities, though not definitive proof. The case leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence. In 1983, Paul Freshour was convicted of attempted murder related to the booby trap sign and sentenced to prison.
You think that Paul Freshour is the Circleville letter writer?
Yes, I honestly do.
For many residents, this verdict felt like closure. The tormentor had been identified. Justice had been delivered. The town could begin to heal, but the story did not end. Letters that refused to end and a mystery that survived decades. If Paul Freshour had been responsible for the years of harassment, his imprisonment should have brought silence. Instead, the letters continued. Residents reported receiving new envelopes written in the same careful block lettering. The tone remained consistent. The knowledge remained personal. Even Paul reportedly received a letter while incarcerated, one implying he had been set up. This development shattered the fragile certainty that had followed his conviction. If Paul was guilty,
I don't think Paul was guilty. I think he served those 10 years in prison. I don't think he was guilty of the attempted murder. And I don't really think he was the letter writer.
how were the letters still being sent without clear evidence of his involvement from prison?
He was strip searched. All his incoming and outgoing mail was inspected. There is absolutely, positively no way Paul Freshour was writing those letters and smuggling them out from prison.
While inmates can sometimes communicate secretly, investigators found no definitive proof linking him to continued correspondence.
Warden insisted that would be impossible. They kept him in isolation. They did not allow him to have pens or paper.
If he was innocent, then the true writer remained free, quietly observing the chaos they had created. The psychological dimension of the case became more disturbing than the physical threats. The anonymous writer had demonstrated an intimate understanding of human vulnerability. They knew how to exploit shame, doubt, and social pressure. In a small town, reputation is survival. By weaponizing secrets, real or fabricated, they destabilize families and friendships alike. Over time, the frequency of letters declined. By the mid-1990s, particularly after Paul's release, the correspondence largely stopped. The timing only deepened the mystery. Did their disappearance confirm his guilt? Or did it suggest that the real author had achieved their objective and simply chosen to fade away? No confession ever surfaced. No forensic breakthrough conclusively identified the writer. The case remains one of the most unsettling examples of anonymous terror in American history. It did not rely on grand spectacle or widespread violence. It relied on something more insidious: control through fear. The Circleville letters changed the town permanently. Trust once broken never fully returns. The illusion that familiarity guarantees safety was shattered. Even decades later, the unanswered questions linger. Who possessed such intimate knowledge? What motive drove them? Revenge, obsession, moral judgment, or psychological thrill? And perhaps most haunting of all, how did they manage to remain hidden in plain sight? Deeper theories and unanswered questions. Even after Paul Freshour was imprisoned, The letter's persistence forced residents and investigators alike to confront an uncomfortable truth. The real identity of the Circleville letter writer might never be known. If Paul had been responsible for only the booby trap sign, then someone else had continued the harassment with painstaking accuracy, exploiting decades of intimate knowledge about the town and its families. The theories about who could have orchestrated such a campaign were numerous and often contradictory. Some suggested a family member of Mary Gillespie, someone with both motive and access to information. Others argued it had to be a local with no direct familial connection, but an obsessive fascination with the community. The psychological profile of the author became as important to investigators as any physical evidence. Whoever it was, they demonstrated meticulous planning, patience, and a capacity for cruelty that far exceeded typical harassment. They did not act impulsively. They studied their victims, timed their threats, and ensured that each action reinforced a sense of dread. Speculation about the author's motives ran the gamut. Was it revenge for a perceived slight? Perhaps a relative or friend felt wronged by one of the families and used the letters as a method of punishment. Was it obsession, a compulsive desire to dominate and frighten an entire community? Or could it have been something darker, a psychological thrill, an experiment in control? Mary Gillespie and a community divided for Mary Gillespie. The first letter marked the beginning of years filled with anxiety and vigilance. As a school bus driver, she was constantly visible. Rumors spread quickly. Parents whispered. Strangers stared. Every new envelope felt like a personal attack. Her daily life changed. Checking the mail brought dread. Driving her bus route felt unsafe. Even small errands carried emotional weight. The letters forced her into a state of constant alertness, always expecting the next threat. But the damage extended beyond Mary. The town of Circleville slowly fractured. Families argued, neighbors grew suspicious, friendships weakened. Some residents believed the letters exposed truths. Others believed they were malicious lies. Either way, trust eroded. When Paul Freshour was convicted in connection to the case, many hoped the fear would end. But doubts remained. Could one man alone have written so many letters over so many years? If not, was the real author still living quietly among them? Mary became both a victim and a symbol. She had to defend her reputation publicly while enduring private terror. The sense of being watched never truly disappeared. Paul Freshour, justice or mistake? The conviction of Paul Freshour remains controversial. The evidence against him was mostly circumstantial. He had access to a firearm used in a booby trap sign intended for Mary, and he had possible motive. But handwriting analysis was inconclusive. Experts could not prove he wrote the letters. If Paul was guilty, why did letters reportedly continue after his imprisonment? Did he have help? Could he have coordinated from prison? These questions remain unanswered. If he was innocent, the truth becomes even more disturbing. That would mean the real author successfully avoided suspicion, while an innocent man took the blame. His conviction may have provided closure for the town, but not certainty. Legal observers later noted how public pressure and circumstantial evidence can influence outcomes. The town wanted a solution. Paul's arrest gave them one, but wanting answers does not guarantee truth. The psychological grip. The Circleville letters demonstrate the terrifying power of anonymity. When a threat has no face, it grows larger. The unknown becomes more frightening than reality. The writer manipulated perception. People questioned their memories. Casual conversations felt suspicious. Community gatherings carried tension. Everyday routines, checking mail, attending school events, became stressful. The author had turned Circleville into a living experiment in fear. One hidden individual controlled the emotional atmosphere of an entire town without ever stepping into the light. Why the mystery endures?
It's a small town, so chances are the people know who wrote the letters.
Well, that's what's so astounding that they didn't. Imagine that we're talking about 13,000 people. It's about 30 miles away from Clovis, where
The case remains officially unsolved for several reasons. Careful block handwriting limited forensic comparison. Letters were mailed from multiple locations. The author showed psychological sophistication.
The person who wrote these letters is callous, vicious, enjoyed hurting people, and that doesn't fit that person.
The conviction of Paul Freshour reduced urgency to pursue other suspects. Even with modern forensic tools, there is no definitive proof identifying the writer.
It must have been awful. I mean, it was just sort of this all-invasive poison. There was nobody that was off limits to this letter writer.
The lasting legacy. The greatest damage caused by the Circleville letters was not physical, it was emotional. The town learned how fragile trust can be. Familiar faces no longer guaranteed safety. A close-knit community became vulnerable to suspicion and division. Even after the letters stopped, the fear lingered. Relationships had changed. Confidence had weakened. The question remained, who truly knew everyone's secrets? The Circleville letters were more than anonymous threats. They were a calculated exercise in control and psychological domination. Secrets were weaponized. Reputations were threatened. A town was placed under invisible surveillance. The author was never conclusively identified. Someone observed, manipulated, and terrified an entire community and remained hidden. And that leaves one final question. If someone can control a town from the shadows without ever being caught, how safe are we really? Subscribe for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries and psychological crime cases that continue to haunt the world today.